What happens when a scared child becomes the teacher of courage to those sworn to protect them? In a world where we often see royalty as distant figures living in gilded cages, this true story reveals something extraordinary. It's about a young prince whose greatest lessons came not from royal tutors or grand ceremonies, but from moments of pure, innocent wisdom that transformed everyone around him. This isn't just another royal tale. It's about a guard who thought he knew what bravery meant until a child showed him the difference between following orders and following his heart. It's about how sometimes the smallest voices carry the most powerful truths, and how courage isn't always about facing armies. Sometimes it's about facing yourself. Prepare to discover how Prince Catherine's simple childhood observations became life-changing lessons that rippled through the palace walls, touching lives in ways no one could have imagined. This is a story about finding strength in unexpected places, about the power of genuine human connection, and about how true nobility has nothing to do with titles. Get ready for a journey that will make you believe in the extraordinary power of ordinary moments, and remind you that heroes often come in the smallest packages. The morning mist clung to the ancient stones of Ravenscroft Palace like whispered secrets from centuries past. Captain Marcus Wellington adjusted his ceremonial uniform for the third time, his weathered hands betraying a nervousness that 20 years of military service had never quite managed to eliminate. Today marked his first assignment as personal guard to Prince Catherine, the youngest member of the royal family at just 8 years old. Marcus had served in conflicts across 3 continents, had stared down enemy fire without flinching, and had earned medals that decorated his chest like metallic proof of his courage. Yet standing outside the ornate doors of the prince's quarters, he felt a different kind of uncertainty creeping through his chest. Protecting a child was entirely different from leading soldiers into battle. The palace corridors echoed with his footsteps as he made his way to meet Queen Isabella, Prince Catherine's mother. She had specifically requested Marcus for this assignment, though he couldn't fathom why. His reputation was built on warfare and strategy, not on managing the daily life of a royal child. Captain Wellington. Queen Isabella greeted him warmly as he entered her private study. The room was filled with morning sunlight that streamed through tall windows, casting golden rectangles across Persian rugs and mahogany furniture. She was younger than Marcus had expected, perhaps in her early 30s, with kind eyes that held depths of both strength and gentleness. "Your Majesty," Marcus replied with a sharp bow, his military training taking over. "I am honored to serve Prince Catherine in whatever capacity you require." Queen Isabella smiled and gestured for him to sit in one of the comfortable armchairs positioned near the fireplace. "Captain, I want you to understand something important before you meet my son. Catherine is not like other children, and this assignment is not like other assignments you've had." Marcus straightened in his chair, listening intently. He had been briefed on basic security protocols and the prince's daily schedule, but something in the queen's tone suggested there was much more to learn. "My son has what some might call a gift," Queen Isabella continued, her voice soft but firm. "He sees the world differently than most people. He notices things that others miss, feels emotions more deeply, and has an unusual ability to understand people's hearts. This makes him both wonderful and vulnerable." The queen stood and walked to one of the windows, gazing out at the palace gardens where gardeners were tending to late-blooming roses. 3 months ago, we had an incident. A member of our staff, someone we trusted completely, attempted to harm Catherine, not for political reasons or ransom, but because he was struggling with personal demons and saw my son's innocence as somehow offensive to his own pain. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. The idea of anyone wanting to hurt a child, especially for such twisted reasons, made his protective instincts surge. "Was the prince harmed, Your Majesty?" "Physically, no. But emotionally." Queen Isabella turned back to face him, and Marcus could see the weight of worry in her expression. Catherine blamed himself. He said he should have been nicer to the man, should have noticed his pain earlier. "My 8-year-old son took responsibility for an adult's mental illness and violent intentions." The morning sun had risen higher, and the study was now filled with bright, warm light that seemed to emphasize the serious nature of their conversation. Marcus began to understand why this assignment was different from anything he had experienced before. I need someone who can protect Catherine's body and his spirit, Queen Isabella explained. Someone strong enough to guard against physical threats, but wise enough to help him navigate the emotional complexities he faces every day. Someone who won't just follow protocols, but will genuinely care about my son's well-being. Marcus nodded slowly, beginning to grasp the magnitude of what was being asked of him. Your Majesty, I will do everything in my power to keep Prince Catherine safe. But, I must admit, I have more experience with military strategy than with childhood psychology. That's exactly why I chose you, Queen Isabella replied, surprising him. Catherine needs someone authentic, someone who doesn't pretend to have all the answers. He has enough people around him who speak in careful, measured words. I want him to have someone real. Before Marcus could respond, a soft knock came at the study door. Come in, sweetheart, Queen Isabella called. And the door opened to reveal a small figure with tousled brown hair and bright blue eyes. Prince Catherine entered the room with the cautious curiosity typical of children his age, but Marcus immediately noticed something different about the boy. There was an alertness in his gaze, an awareness that seemed older than his years. The prince wore simple clothes, dark blue pants, and a white shirt, rather than the formal attire Marcus had expected. Catherine, I'd like you to meet Captain Marcus Wellington, Queen Isabella said gently. He's going to be spending time with us, helping to keep you safe. The young prince looked up at Marcus with those penetrating blue eyes, studying him with an intensity that was both endearing and slightly unnerving. Are you scared? Catherine asked suddenly. The question caught Marcus completely off guard. In 20 years of military service, no one had ever asked him such a direct, personal question upon first meeting. What do you mean, Your Highness? I can see it in your eyes, Catherine said matter-of-factly, stepping closer to Marcus. You're worried about something. Are you scared of me? Marcus glanced at Queen Isabella, who was watching the interaction with interest but offering no guidance. He realized this was some kind of test, though he wasn't sure of what. He decided to answer honestly. I'm not scared of you, Prince Catherine, Marcus said, kneeling down so he could look the boy directly in the eyes. But I am worried about doing a good job taking care of you. I've never protected someone so young before, and I want to make sure I don't let you or your mother down. Catherine tilted his head thoughtfully, considering Marcus's words. My last guard was scared of me, the prince said quietly. He thought I was weird because I asked too many questions and noticed when people were sad. That doesn't sound weird to me, Marcus replied. It sounds like you care about people. A small smile crossed Catherine's face, the first genuine expression Marcus had seen from the boy. Do you want to see my favorite place in the palace? Catherine asked. It might help you not be so worried. Marcus looked to Queen Isabella, who nodded encouragingly. I think that's a wonderful idea, she said. Captain, why don't you spend some time getting to know each other? We can discuss the more formal aspects of security later. As they left the study together, Marcus walking slightly behind the young prince, he found himself wondering what kind of place an 8-year-old royal would consider his favorite. He expected perhaps an elaborate playroom or a garden pavilion designed specifically for children. Instead, Catherine led him through several corridors and up 2 flights of stairs to a modest balcony that overlooked the palace's main courtyard. The space was simple, just a stone railing and a small wooden bench, but the view was spectacular. From here, they could see the entire daily life of the palace unfolding below. I come here when I need to think, Catherine explained, climbing onto the bench so he could see better over the railing. You can see everything from here. The guards changing shifts, the kitchen staff bringing in supplies, the gardeners working, the stable hands exercising the horses. Everyone has their own important job. Marcus stood beside the bench, looking down at the courtyard activity. From a security perspective, the location made him nervous, too exposed, too many sight lines from other buildings. But he tried to see it through Catherine's eyes. Sometimes I pretend I'm invisible, Catherine continued, his voice thoughtful. I watch people when they don't know anyone is looking, and I try to understand what makes them happy or sad. What do you see? Marcus asked, genuinely curious. Catherine pointed to a young woman crossing the courtyard with a basket of laundry. She's new here. Started working last week. She walks fast, and keeps her head down because she's still nervous about making mistakes. But watch her face when she passes the fountain. Marcus observed the woman as she approached the ornate fountain in the center of the courtyard. As she passed it, her pace slowed slightly, and a small smile crossed her face as she listened to the sound of falling water. She likes the fountain, Catherine said with satisfaction. It reminds her of something good from home. Maybe a river or a waterfall near where she grew up. Small things like that help people feel less lonely in a new place. Marcus stared at the young prince, amazed by the depth of his observation. How do you know all that? I just pay attention, Catherine replied with a shrug. Adults think children don't understand things, but we see everything. We just don't always know what to do with what we see. They stood in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the palace life unfold below them. Marcus found himself beginning to relax despite the security concerns the location presented. There was something peaceful about seeing the world from this perspective, and he started to understand why Catherine found comfort here. Captain Marcus? Catherine said eventually. Can I ask you something personal? Of course, Prince Catherine. Why did you become a soldier? Was it because you wanted to protect people, or because you wanted to feel brave? Once again, the boy's directness caught Marcus off guard. It was a question that cut straight to the heart of motivations Marcus had never fully examined himself. I suppose. I wanted to serve my country, and I wanted to prove that I was courageous. Did you feel brave in battles? Catherine asked, turning to look directly at Marcus. Marcus considered the question carefully. Sometimes, but mostly I was just trying to do my job and keep my fellow soldiers safe. The bravery part came and went. Catherine nodded as if this made perfect sense. I think being brave is harder when you're trying to protect someone you care about than when you're just trying to protect yourself. The simple wisdom in that statement hit Marcus like a physical force. This 8-year-old child had just articulated something that Marcus had felt, but never been able to express in all his years of military service. You're right, Marcus said quietly. It is harder. That's why you're worried, Catherine observed. Not because you don't know how to be brave, but because now your bravery has to be about me, not just about you. Marcus felt something shift inside his chest, a recognition that this conversation was changing something fundamental about how he viewed his role here. This wasn't just another assignment. This was about protecting someone who understood the weight of protection in ways that seemed impossible for someone so young. A bell chimed somewhere in the palace, signaling the approach of midday. Catherine jumped down from the bench with the easy agility of childhood. We should go back, he said. Lunch is soon, and Cook gets worried when I'm late. As they made their way back through the palace corridors, Marcus found himself seeing the place differently. Every servant they passed, every guard at his post, every detail of the architecture seemed more vivid and purposeful. He realized that Catherine's way of seeing the world was already beginning to influence his own perspective. When they reached the main dining hall, Queen Isabella was waiting with a warm smile. How did your tour go? She asked. Prince Catherine showed me his thinking place, Marcus replied. It was enlightening. Catherine looked up at Marcus with those perceptive blue eyes. Captain Marcus understands about protecting people, the prince told his mother. He knows it's different when you care about someone. Queen Isabella's expression softened as she looked between her son and the new guard. I'm glad you two are getting along so well. As they settled in for lunch, Marcus realized that his first morning with Prince Catherine had already taught him more about courage, protection, and human nature than many of his military campaigns had. The boy's innocent wisdom was like a lens that brought everything into clearer focus. He also realized that this assignment was going to challenge him in ways he had never anticipated. Protecting Prince Catherine wouldn't just be about physical security or following protocols. It would be about understanding a unique young person who saw the world with exceptional clarity and helping him navigate that gift safely. The afternoon sun streamed through the dining hall windows as they shared their meal, and Marcus felt a sense of purpose settling over him that was different from anything he had experienced in his military career. This wasn't about strategy or victory or proving his own courage. This was about helping a remarkable child grow up safely in a world that might not always understand or appreciate his special way of seeing things. And, somehow, Marcus suspected that in the process of protecting Catherine, he might learn as much about courage and wisdom as he hoped to teach. 3 weeks into his assignment, Marcus had established what he thought was a comfortable routine with Prince Catherine. Morning walks through the palace gardens, afternoon lessons with the royal tutors, evening discussions about the day's events. Yet every day seemed to bring new surprises that challenged his understanding of both his role and the remarkable child he was protecting. The morning that would change everything started like any other. Marcus arrived at Catherine's quarters at precisely 7 o'clock to find the young prince already awake and dressed, sitting by his window reading a book about astronomy. The early autumn sunlight caught the golden highlights in Catherine's brown hair as he looked up with his characteristic bright smile. "Good morning, Captain Marcus," Catherine said, closing his book carefully and marking his place with a ribbon bookmark. "Did you know that some stars are actually dying when they look the brightest to us?" Marcus had grown accustomed to Catherine's habit of sharing fascinating facts as greetings, but this particular observation struck him as unusually profound. "No, I didn't know that, Prince Catherine. Where did you learn about stars dying?" "In this book Professor Williams gave me," Catherine replied, holding up the astronomy text. "But it made me think about people too. Sometimes people seem the happiest right before something really sad happens to them." The boy's ability to draw meaningful connections between seemingly unrelated concepts never ceased to amaze Marcus. "What made you think about that?" Catherine set down his book and walked to the window, looking out at the palace grounds where staff members were beginning their daily tasks. "Yesterday, when we were in the kitchen garden with Cook, I noticed that Harold the stable master kept laughing extra loud and telling lots of jokes. But his eyes looked scared." Marcus joined Catherine at the window, following the boy's gaze toward the stable area. Harold had been with the royal family for 15 years and was known for his gentle way with both horses and people. "Did you mention this to anyone?" "I tried to tell Mother, but she was busy with the visiting diplomats from Cordonia," Catherine said with a small sigh. "And when I asked Harold if he was okay, he just laughed more and said I worry too much for a little boy." Something in Catherine's tone alerted Marcus that this wasn't just casual childhood observation. The boy had demonstrated repeatedly that his insights about people were remarkably accurate. "What exactly did you notice about Harold's behavior?" Catherine turned away from the window and sat on the edge of his bed, his expression serious beyond his years. He kept touching his chest like it hurt, but trying to hide it. And when he thought no one was looking, his face got really pale and worried. "Plus, yesterday morning I saw him give his favorite horse an extra long hug, like he was saying goodbye." A chill ran down Marcus's spine. Catherine's observations painted a picture that suggested Harold might be dealing with some kind of serious health issue, possibly a heart problem. The boy's intuitive understanding of human behavior had once again picked up on subtleties that adults had missed. "Prince Catherine," Marcus said carefully, "I think we should take your observations very seriously. Would you like to come with me to check on Harold?" Catherine's face brightened with relief. "You believe me? You don't think I'm just imagining things?" "I've learned to trust your insights," Marcus replied honestly. "You notice things that other people miss. And that's not imagination, that's a gift." They made their way to the stables together, taking the path through the herb garden that Catherine preferred because it offered more interesting things to observe along the way. The morning air was crisp with the promise of autumn, and the scent of lavender and rosemary provided a calming backdrop to Marcus's growing concern about Harold. As they approached the stable complex, they could hear Harold's voice carrying across the courtyard. He was indeed laughing loudly while talking to one of the younger stable hands. But even from a distance, Marcus could detect a forced quality in the sound that supported Catherine's observations. "There he is," Catherine whispered, pointing toward the main stable entrance where Harold was examining one of the royal carriage horses. "Watch how he keeps stopping to catch his breath, but then pretends he was just thinking about something." Marcus observed Harold carefully, and Catherine was absolutely right. The stable master would pause in his work, press his hand briefly to his chest, take a few deep breaths, then immediately resume activity with exaggerated energy when anyone looked his way. "Harold," Marcus called out as they approached. "Good morning. How are the horses today, Captain Wellington?" "Prince Catherine," Harold replied with his characteristic booming voice, but Marcus could now hear the slight breathlessness beneath the enthusiasm. "The horses are magnificent as always." Though old Thunder here seems a bit restless this morning. Catherine stepped forward and gently patted Thunder's neck. The horse, a gentle giant who had served the royal family for over a decade, lowered his massive head to nuzzle the boy's shoulder. He can sense that you're not feeling well, Catherine said quietly to Harold. Animals know when people they care about are hurting. Harold's forced smile faltered for a moment, and Marcus saw genuine surprise flash across the man's weathered face. What do you mean, young prince? You keep touching your chest, Catherine observed with the matter-of-fact directness that characterized all his communications. And you're breathing differently than usual. Are you having pain in your heart? The color drained from Harold's face, and he reached out to steady himself against Thunder's sturdy flank. Marcus immediately moved closer, recognizing the signs of someone who had been trying to hide serious symptoms and was now confronted with the reality of his condition. Harold, Marcus said gently but firmly, how long have you been experiencing chest pain? For a long moment, Harold stood silent, his hand still pressed against Thunder's neck as if drawing strength from the horse's steady presence. Finally, he looked down at Catherine with an expression of wonder mixed with resignation. 3 weeks, Harold admitted quietly. Started as just a little pressure, but it's been getting worse. I can't afford to lose this job. My wife depends on the income, and if the royal family thinks I'm too sick to work. Harold, Marcus interrupted, your health is more important than any job, and the royal family cares about you as a person, not just as an employee. Catherine stepped closer to Harold and placed his small hand on the stable master's arm. My mother always says that people are more valuable than horses or carriages or any of the things we think are important. You're part of our family here. Harold looked down at the young prince, and tears began to form in his eyes. You really noticed all that? A little boy saw what all the adults missed. Captain Marcus taught me that paying attention to people is one of the most important jobs anyone can have, Catherine replied. And he believes me when I notice things, which helps me trust that what I see matters. Marcus felt a surge of pride at Catherine's words, realizing that their relationship was already influencing how the boy viewed his own perceptions and abilities. But, more immediately, he knew they needed to get Harold medical attention quickly. Harold, we're going to call the royal physician right now, Marcus said decisively. And I'm going to personally ensure that your job and your family's security are protected regardless of any health issues you might be facing. I don't want to cause trouble, Harold protested weakly, though his relief at finally sharing his burden was evident in his posture. The only trouble would be if we ignored this, Catherine said with startling wisdom. Captain Marcus told me that real courage means asking for help when you need it, not just pretending everything is fine. As Marcus sent word to the palace for the royal physician to come to the stables immediately, he reflected on how Catherine had once again demonstrated the profound impact of his unique perspective. The boy's ability to see beyond surface appearances and notice genuine human need was remarkable, but equally impressive was his courage in speaking up despite being dismissed by adults who thought he worried too much. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, the royal physician, arrived within minutes and immediately began examining Harold. Her expression grew increasingly serious as she listened to his heart and asked detailed questions about his symptoms. Harold, you're experiencing what appears to be unstable angina, Dr. Morrison explained after completing her initial assessment. This is a serious condition that requires immediate medical intervention. We need to get you to the hospital right away. Harold's face went pale, but Catherine stepped forward and took the stable master's hand in both of his own. Dr. Morrison is really good at helping people, the prince said confidently. She helped cook when he hurt his back, and she made sure Jenny the kitchen maid got better when she had that bad fever. You're going to be okay. But what about Thunder and the other horses? Harold asked, his concern for his charges evident even in his medical crisis. I'll personally oversee the stable operations until you're back on your feet, Marcus assured him. And Prince Catherine can help me learn the specific needs of each horse. Right, Prince Catherine? I know all their personalities and preferences, Catherine confirmed. Thunder likes to have his ears scratched in the morning, and Lady Belle won't eat her oats unless they're mixed with apple pieces, and Sir Galahad needs extra walking time because he gets restless when it rains. Harold stared at the young prince with amazement. You've been paying attention to all that? I pay attention to everything that's important, Catherine replied simply. And the horses are important because they're important to you. As the medical team prepared to transport Harold to the hospital, the stable master gripped Marcus's hand with surprising strength. Thank you for listening to the boy, he said quietly. I might not have made it through another week if he hadn't noticed. Thank Prince Catherine, Marcus replied. He's the one who saw what needed to be seen. After Harold was safely on his way to receive proper medical care, Marcus and Catherine remained in the stable with Thunder and the other horses. The morning's events had been emotionally intense, and Marcus could see that Catherine was processing the experience deeply. Are you okay? Marcus asked as Catherine continued to pat Thunder's neck with gentle, rhythmic strokes. I'm glad Harold is going to get help, Catherine said thoughtfully. But I keep thinking about what would have happened if we hadn't come to the stables this morning, or if you hadn't believed what I noticed. Marcus knelt down beside Catherine so they could speak at eye level. What would have happened is that Harold would have continued suffering in silence, and eventually he might have had a heart attack. Your observations and your courage to speak up probably saved his life. But why don't adults usually listen when children notice things? Catherine asked, his blue eyes reflecting a wisdom that seemed far older than his 8 years. We see the same things they do, sometimes even more clearly because we're not worried about being polite or following rules about what we're supposed to notice. The question struck Marcus as profoundly important, touching on issues of authority, wisdom, and the value of different perspectives. I think sometimes adults forget that wisdom can come from anyone, regardless of age, he said carefully. We get so focused on our own responsibilities and worries that we miss the insights that others, especially children, can offer. Catherine nodded thoughtfully. When I told Mother about Harold yesterday, she wasn't really listening because she was thinking about the diplomatic meeting. But she wasn't trying to ignore me on purpose. That's right, Marcus confirmed. Adults often have their attention divided among many competing demands. That doesn't make it right to dismiss what children observe, but it helps explain why it happens. So how can we make sure important things don't get missed? Catherine asked. Marcus considered the question seriously, recognizing that Catherine was asking about fundamental issues of communication, attention, and value in human relationships. I think it starts with people like you and me making sure we really listen to each other, and then setting an example for others to follow. Catherine smiled at that, the first genuinely happy expression Marcus had seen from him since the morning's medical crisis began. I like that we listen to each other, Captain Marcus. It makes me feel like what I notice really matters. It does matter, Marcus assured him. Your insights about people are remarkable, and I'm learning that paying attention the way you do makes me better at protecting you and understanding the world around us. They spent the remainder of the morning caring for the horses and learning about their individual needs and personalities. Marcus discovered that Catherine's observations about the animals were as accurate as his insights about people. The boy seemed to have an intuitive understanding of what each horse needed to feel comfortable and secure. By the time they returned to the palace for lunch, word had spread about Harold's medical emergency and Catherine's role in recognizing the seriousness of his condition. Queen Isabella was waiting for them in the family dining room, her expression a mixture of pride and concern. Catherine, I heard about this morning, she said, embracing her son warmly. Captain Wellington told me how you noticed that Harold wasn't well. I should have tried harder to make you listen yesterday, Catherine said quietly. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know how to make adults understand. Queen Isabella knelt down and took Catherine's hands in hers. Sweetheart, you did exactly the right thing. You noticed something important, you tried to communicate it, and when that didn't work the first time, you found another way to get help. That's not just observation, that's leadership. But what if Captain Marcus hadn't believed me either? Catherine asked. But I did believe you, Marcus interjected. And that's because you've taught me to trust your insights. Sometimes it takes the right person being ready to listen at the right moment. Queen Isabella looked at Marcus with gratitude evident in her expression. Thank you for taking Catherine's observations seriously. Dr. Morrison confirmed that Harold was indeed in danger of a major cardiac event. Your quick response quite literally saved his life. As they shared lunch together, Marcus reflected on the morning's events and their broader implications. Catherine's gift for reading people and situations was clearly valuable, but equally important was the boy's courage in speaking up when he perceived danger or need. The challenge was creating an environment where those insights could be heard and acted upon effectively. Prince Catherine, Marcus said as they finished their meal, I want to make you a promise. From now on, whenever you have concerns about someone's well-being, I will always take them seriously and help you figure out the best way to address them. Catherine's face lit up with relief and happiness. Really? Even if it seems like a small thing? Especially if it seems like a small thing, Marcus replied. You've taught me that small observations often reveal big truths. Queen Isabella smiled warmly at both of them. It sounds like you two are developing an excellent partnership. As the afternoon continued, Marcus realized that the morning's events had fundamentally shifted his understanding of his role as Catherine's protector. He wasn't just responsible for the boy's physical safety. He was also responsible for nurturing and protecting Catherine's remarkable ability to see and understand the world around him. That evening, as they made their usual walk through the palace gardens before bedtime, Catherine was unusually quiet. Finally, as they sat on a bench near the rose garden, the boy spoke up. Captain Marcus, do you think Harold will be okay? Dr. Morrison is an excellent physician, and she caught his condition early thanks to your observations, Marcus replied. I think he has a very good chance of making a full recovery. Catherine nodded, seeming satisfied with that answer. Then, he looked up at Marcus with those perceptive blue eyes. Today taught me something important about courage. What's that? Courage isn't just about not being afraid, Catherine said thoughtfully. It's about doing the right thing even when you're not sure if anyone will listen to you. Marcus felt a profound sense of pride and wonder at the young prince's insight. That's exactly right, Catherine. And today you demonstrated that kind of courage perfectly. As they made their way back to Catherine's quarters, Marcus knew that the events of this day would stay with him forever. He had witnessed not just the saving of a life, but the flowering of a young person's understanding of his own power to make a positive difference in the world. 2 months after the incident with Harold, autumn had settled deeply over Ravenscroft Palace. The ancient oak trees that lined the main courtyard had turned brilliant shades of gold and crimson, their leaves dancing in the crisp October wind. Marcus had grown to love this season at the palace, partly because the cooler weather meant longer walks with Catherine through the extensive grounds, and partly because the approaching winter holidays brought out a special warmth in the young prince's already generous spirit. Harold had made a complete recovery after his heart surgery and had returned to work with strict instructions to take better care of his health. The stable master never failed to thank Catherine whenever they visited the horses, crediting the boy's observational skills with saving his life. This ongoing gratitude had done wonders for Catherine's confidence in trusting his own perceptions about people. On this particular morning, Marcus arrived at Catherine's quarters to find the boy sitting at his desk, carefully writing in what appeared to be a journal. The concentration on Catherine's face was intense, his tongue sticking out slightly as he formed each letter with deliberate precision. Good morning, Prince Catherine, Marcus said softly, not wanting to interrupt what was clearly important work. I'm writing down my observations about people in the palace. Mother suggested it might help me organize my thoughts better. Marcus approached the desk, curious about this new development. That sounds like an excellent idea. What kind of observations are you recording? All kinds of things, Catherine replied enthusiastically. Like how Cook hums different songs depending on whether she's happy or worried. And how the new guard Thomas always checks his pocket watch when he's nervous. And how Lady Margaret from the diplomatic corps touches her earring when she's trying to decide whether to tell the truth about something. The level of detail in Catherine's observations was remarkable, but Marcus found himself wondering about the implications of such systematic attention to people's behaviors and tells. Have you shared any of these observations with your mother? Some of them, Catherine said, closing the journal carefully. She says it shows that I care about people, which is good, but she also wants me to be careful about how I use what I notice. This seemed like an important conversation for them to have together. What do you think she means by that? Catherine set down his pen and turned in his chair to face Marcus directly. I think she means that knowing things about people comes with responsibility. Just because I can see when someone is lying or scared or sad doesn't mean I should always say something about it. The maturity of this insight impressed Marcus greatly. That's very wise, Prince Catherine. Can you give me an example of what you mean? Well, Catherine said thoughtfully. Yesterday I noticed that Sir Edmund, the new ambassador from Westmarch, was very nervous during the dinner party. He kept wiping his hands on his napkin, and his voice got higher when he talked about the trade agreements. But he wasn't being dishonest or doing anything wrong. He was just nervous because it was his first formal dinner here. Marcus nodded encouragingly. So what did you decide to do with that observation? I decided to try to help him feel more comfortable instead of pointing out that he was nervous, Catherine explained. So I asked him about his children, because I remembered Mother mentioning that he had twins about my age. When he started talking about them, he relaxed and stopped being so fidgety. That was very thoughtful of you, Marcus said, genuinely impressed by Catherine's emotional intelligence. You used your observations to help someone feel better rather than to embarrass them. Catherine beamed at the praise. That's what Mother means about responsibility, isn't it? When you can see things that other people miss, you have to decide what the kindest thing to do with that information is. Before Marcus could respond, a knock came at Catherine's door. Come in, the prince called, and Sarah, one of the younger housekeeping staff, peeked into the room. Begging your pardon, Your Highness, Captain Wellington, Sarah said with a nervous curtsy. Her Majesty requests that you join her in the blue salon when you're ready. She has some visitors she'd like Prince Catherine to meet. Thank you, Sarah, Catherine replied politely. We'll be there in just a few minutes. As Sarah left, closing the door behind her, Catherine turned to Marcus with a troubled expression. Did you notice anything about Sarah just now? Marcus thought back to the brief interaction. She seemed nervous, but that's fairly normal when staff members are delivering messages to the royal family. It was more than regular nervousness, Catherine said, reaching for his journal and flipping to a page near the back. I've been watching Sarah for the past 2 weeks, and something's been wrong. Marcus felt that familiar alertness that came whenever Catherine identified a potential problem. What have you observed? Catherine consulted his notes, reading carefully. She's lost weight, but not in a healthy way. Her uniforms are loose, and she looks tired all the time. She jumps when people speak to her suddenly, and she's been avoiding the other staff members during meal times. The pattern Catherine was describing sounded concerning, possibly indicating some form of stress or abuse. Have you mentioned this to anyone? I tried to talk to Mrs. Henderson, the head of housekeeping, but she said Sarah was just working hard to prove herself as a new employee, Catherine replied. But this doesn't look like someone working hard. This looks like someone who's scared. Marcus made a mental note to investigate Sarah's situation more thoroughly. Catherine's track record for identifying people in distress was too strong to ignore. What do you think we should do? I think we should try to talk to Sarah directly, Catherine said with determination. But in a way that doesn't make her feel like she's in trouble or that she has to tell us anything she doesn't want to share. The wisdom of this approach impressed Marcus. Catherine was learning not just to observe and identify problems, but to think strategically about the most helpful ways to respond to what he discovered. That's an excellent plan, Marcus agreed. But first, we should go meet your mother's visitors. We can talk to Sarah afterward. They made their way to the Blue Salon, one of the palace's more intimate reception rooms. The space was decorated in soft blue and silver tones, with comfortable seating arranged around a fireplace and tall windows that looked out onto the garden. Queen Isabella was seated with 2 women and a man, all dressed in the practical but well-made clothes that suggested educated professionals rather than nobility. Ah, Catherine, Captain Wellington, Queen Isabella said warmly as they entered. I'd like you to meet Dr. Elizabeth Hartley, Dr. Sarah Chun, and Professor James Morrison. They're researchers studying the social development of gifted children. Catherine executed a perfect formal bow while Marcus stood at attention. It's a pleasure to meet you, Catherine said politely, though Marcus could see the boy's analytical mind already at work, studying these new people with his characteristic intensity. The pleasure is ours, Your Highness, Dr. Hartley replied with a warm smile. Your mother has told us remarkable things about your observational abilities and emotional intelligence. Catherine glanced at his mother uncertainly. Are you here to study me? Dr. Chen leaned forward slightly, her expression kind but serious. We're interested in understanding how children with exceptional social awareness develop and how we can support them. Your mother thought you might enjoy discussing some of your observations and insights with us. Will it help other children like me? Catherine asked directly. Professor Morrison nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. There are many children who see and understand things about people that adults miss. By learning more about how this ability develops, we can help teachers and parents recognize and nurture these gifts. Marcus watched Catherine consider this information carefully. The boy's expression showed both curiosity and caution, which seemed entirely appropriate given the situation. I'd be happy to talk with you, Catherine said finally. But I have some questions first. Of course, Dr. Hartley replied. What would you like to know? Will you share what I tell you with other people without asking me first? Catherine asked. And do you think there's something wrong with me that needs to be fixed? The directness of these questions seemed to surprise the researchers, but Marcus noted with approval that they took the boy's concerns seriously. We would never share anything you tell us without your permission, Dr. Chen assured him. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with you that needs fixing. Your abilities are gifts, not problems. What we're hoping to learn, Professor Morrison added, is how children like you can be better understood and supported so you don't feel isolated or different in negative ways. Catherine nodded slowly, apparently satisfied with these answers. Okay, I'll talk with you. But I want Captain Marcus to stay with me. And I want to be able to stop whenever I feel like it. Those are perfectly reasonable conditions, Queen Isabella said with a proud smile at her son's self-advocacy. The next hour proved to be fascinating for Marcus as he listened to Catherine discuss his observations and insights with the researchers. The boy demonstrated remarkable self-awareness about his abilities while also showing genuine interest in how his experiences compared to those of other children with similar gifts. One thing I've noticed, Catherine told Dr. Hartley, is that adults often don't believe children when we say we can tell how someone is feeling, especially if we're right about something the adults haven't noticed yet. That's a very common experience, Dr. Chen confirmed. Many children with high emotional intelligence feel frustrated when their insights are dismissed. Captain Marcus is different, Catherine continued, glancing at Marcus with obvious affection. He listens to what I observe and helps me figure out how to use my observations in helpful ways. Can you give us an example? Professor Morrison asked. Catherine described the situation with Harold, explaining how he had noticed the stable master's distress and how Marcus had helped him act on his concerns effectively. The researchers took detailed notes, clearly impressed by both the sophistication of Catherine's observations and the supportive response he had received. It sounds like you have an excellent partnership, Dr. Hartley observed. Many children with your abilities struggle because they don't have adults who take their insights seriously. I think Captain Marcus helps me be braver about speaking up when I notice things, Catherine reflected. Before he came here, I sometimes kept my observations to myself because I wasn't sure if they were important enough to share. Marcus felt a surge of pride at Catherine's words, realizing that their relationship was having the positive impact he had hoped for on the boy's confidence and willingness to use his gifts constructively. After the researchers left, promising to return in a few weeks to continue their conversations with Catherine, Queen Isabella invited Marcus and her son to join her for afternoon tea in her private study. How did you feel about talking with the researchers? Queen Isabella asked as they settled into the comfortable chairs near the fireplace. I like them, Catherine replied thoughtfully. They seemed genuinely interested in understanding rather than just studying me like I was a curiosity. And they made me feel like my abilities are valuable rather than strange. They are valuable, Queen Isabella confirmed. But I want you to remember that you're much more than just your observational gifts. You're a wonderful, caring, intelligent young person who happens to have some special abilities. Marcus appreciated Queen Isabella's emphasis on Catherine's wholeness as a person rather than defining him solely by his unusual talents. Mother, Catherine said suddenly, I'm worried about Sarah from the housekeeping staff. I think something might be wrong in her life outside the palace. Queen Isabella's expression grew serious. What have you observed? Catherine shared his concerns about Sarah's physical appearance, behavior changes, and apparent anxiety. Queen Isabella listened intently, and Marcus could see her taking Catherine's observations seriously. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention," Queen Isabella said when Catherine finished. "I'll speak with Mrs. Henderson about it, and we'll make sure Sarah gets whatever support she might need." "Could Captain Marcus and I talk to her first?" Catherine asked. "Sometimes people are more comfortable sharing problems with someone who isn't their boss." Queen Isabella looked at Marcus questioningly. "What do you think, Captain?" "I think Prince Catherine's instincts about approaching Sarah directly are sound," Marcus replied. "If she is dealing with some kind of personal crisis, a gentle, non-threatening conversation might be more effective than a formal inquiry." "All right," Queen Isabella agreed. "But I want you to be very careful not to pressure her or make her feel like her job is at risk in any way." "We'll be careful," Catherine promised. "I just want to help if there's a way to do that." Later that afternoon, Marcus and Catherine found Sarah in one of the smaller laundry rooms, folding bed linens by herself. She looked up nervously when they entered, immediately stopping her work to curtsy. "Please don't stop working on our account," Marcus said gently. "We were just hoping to chat with you for a few minutes." Sarah resumed folding, but her movements were tense and careful. "Is there something I've done wrong, sir?" "Not at all," Catherine said, moving closer so he could help fold some of the smaller items. "We just wanted to make sure you're settling in well at the palace." "Everyone's been very kind," Sarah replied cautiously, though Marcus could see the truth of Catherine's observations about her weight loss and apparent exhaustion. "Sarah," Catherine said softly, "I hope you won't think I'm being nosy, but I've noticed that you seem worried about something. If there's anything we can help with, we'd like to try." Sarah's hands stilled on the sheet she was folding, and Marcus saw tears form in her eyes. I don't know if it's appropriate to discuss personal matters. Sometimes it helps to share burdens," Marcus said gently. "Prince Catherine has a special talent for understanding when people are struggling, and he genuinely cares about the well-being of everyone in the palace." For a long moment, Sarah continued folding in silence. Then, quietly, she began to speak. "My husband, he's been drinking more since he lost his job 3 months ago. And when he drinks, he gets angry. I took this position partly to have a safe place to be during the day." Marcus felt his protective instincts surge, but he forced himself to remain calm and supportive. Catherine moved closer to Sarah, his young face full of compassion. "That sounds really scary," Catherine said simply. "No one should have to be afraid in their own home." "I don't know what to do," Sarah continued, the words coming faster now that she had started sharing. "I can't leave because I have nowhere to go, but I'm afraid of what might happen if his drinking gets worse." "Sarah," Marcus said firmly but kindly, "you're not alone in dealing with this. The royal family has resources to help staff members who are facing personal difficulties." "I don't want charity," Sarah said quickly. "It's not charity," Catherine replied with the wisdom that continually amazed Marcus. "It's just what people do for each other when someone needs help. Like how the palace helped Harold when he was sick, or how Cook helped me learn about herbs when I was interested in gardening." Marcus could see Sarah considering this perspective, and he realized once again how Catherine's innocent way of framing complex situations often made them more manageable for adults. "What kind of help?" Sarah asked hesitantly. "There are safe places you can stay while you figure out longer-term solutions," Marcus explained. "And there are people trained to help with situations like yours. The most important thing is that you don't have to face this alone. And your job here is completely secure," Catherine added. "Mother always says that taking care of yourself and staying safe is the most important job anyone has." By the time they finished their conversation with Sarah, arrangements had been made for her to speak with a counselor who specialized in domestic situations, and temporary housing had been secured in a safe location. Marcus marveled at how Catherine's compassionate approach had created a space where Sarah felt comfortable accepting help. That evening, as they took their usual walk through the palace gardens, Catherine was quieter than usual. Finally, as they sat on their favorite bench near the fountain, he spoke up. "Captain Marcus, why do some people hurt the people they're supposed to love?" The question was difficult, but Marcus had learned that Catherine deserved honest, thoughtful answers to his serious inquiries about human nature. "I think sometimes people are in so much pain themselves that they don't know how to handle it properly," Marcus said carefully. "That doesn't excuse hurting others, but it might help explain why it happens." "It makes me sad that Sarah was scared all the time," Catherine said quietly. It makes me sad too, Marcus agreed. But because you noticed her distress and cared enough to help, she's going to be safer now. Catherine looked up at Marcus with those perceptive blue eyes. Do you think my observations really make a difference? I know they do, Marcus replied without hesitation. You've already helped save Harold's life, and now you've helped Sarah find safety and support. Your gift for seeing people's needs is making the world a better place. As they made their way back to Catherine's quarters, Marcus reflected on the day's events and the ongoing development of the remarkable young person he had been assigned to protect. Catherine was learning not just to observe and understand, but to act with compassion and wisdom on what he discovered about the people around him. The first snowfall of winter arrived at Ravenscroft Palace in early December, transforming the ancient stone buildings and carefully maintained gardens into a scene from a fairy tale. Marcus stood at the window of the palace's main security office, watching the large, soft flakes drift down through the courtyard while he reviewed the schedule for the upcoming winter festival celebrations. In the 6 months since he had begun protecting Prince Catherine, the palace had become more than just an assignment. It had become home. The winter festival was always a significant event at Ravenscroft, bringing together noble families from across the kingdom as well as local citizens for a week of celebrations, charitable giving, and cultural performances. This year's festival would be particularly special because it marked Prince Catherine's first formal participation in the diplomatic and social responsibilities that came with his royal status. Captain Marcus. Catherine's voice called from the doorway, and Marcus turned to see the boy entering the office with his characteristic bright energy, though there was something different about his expression today, a mixture of excitement and nervousness that Marcus had learned to recognize as significant. Good morning, Prince Catherine, Marcus replied, setting aside his paperwork to give the boy his full attention. You're up early today. Excited about the festival preparations? Catherine approached the window where Marcus had been standing, looking out at the falling snow with wonder that seemed undiminished despite having seen many winters at the palace. I love how the snow makes everything look clean and peaceful, Catherine said thoughtfully. But I'm also worried about some things I've been noticing. Marcus felt that familiar alertness that came whenever Catherine expressed concerns about people or situations. Over the months, he had learned to trust these intuitive warnings completely. What's troubling you? It's about the festival, Catherine began, turning away from the window to face Marcus directly. I've been watching the preparations, and I've noticed some strange patterns in how certain staff members are behaving. Catherine pulled out his observation journal, which had grown considerably thicker since he had started recording his insights systematically. He flipped through several pages before finding the section he wanted. 3 different people have been asking unusual questions about the security arrangements, Catherine continued, reading from his notes. Thomas from the kitchen staff wanted to know which entrances would have the most guards. Maria from housekeeping asked about when the royal family would be in different parts of the palace during the celebrations, and Peter from the grounds crew seemed very interested in the timing of the fireworks display. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter weather outside. Each of those questions, individually, might have innocent explanations. Together, they painted a picture of systematic intelligence gathering that could indicate a serious security threat. Have you mentioned these observations to anyone else? Marcus asked carefully. I tried to tell Mother yesterday, but she's been so busy with the diplomatic preparations that I don't think she really heard what I was saying, Catherine replied with obvious frustration. She said something about everyone being curious about the festival, which is true, but this feels different. How does it feel different? Marcus prompted, knowing that Catherine's intuitive assessments were often more accurate than purely logical analysis. Catherine closed his journal and sat down in one of the chairs near Marcus's desk, his expression serious beyond his 9 years. When people are just excited or curious about something, they ask questions openly, and they seem happy when you answer them. But these 3 people were asking their questions carefully, like they were trying to get specific information without seeming too interested. The sophistication of Catherine's analysis impressed Marcus even as it heightened his concern about the potential threat the boy had identified. Can you tell me more about their behavior patterns? Thomas usually talks a lot and jokes around with everyone in the kitchen, Catherine explained, consulting his journal again. But When he was asking about the guards, he was much quieter than usual, and he kept looking around to make sure no one else was listening. That's not normal for him. Marcus made mental notes, already beginning to formulate a plan for investigating these concerning patterns. What about Maria and Peter? Maria is usually very focused on her own tasks and doesn't ask many questions about things that don't directly affect her work, Catherine continued. But, suddenly, she's very interested in the royal family's schedule during the festival. And Peter has been working here for 5 years, so he already knows about the fireworks timing from previous festivals. Why would he need to ask about it again? The logic of Catherine's observations was compelling, and Marcus realized that the boy had identified what could be a coordinated effort to gather intelligence for some kind of security breach during the festival. The timing would make perfect sense from a threat perspective. The festival brought together high-value targets, created unusual activity patterns that could provide cover for hostile actions, and involved fireworks that could mask other sounds. Prince Catherine, Marcus said seriously, I think your observations have uncovered something very important. I need to alert the security team immediately, and I want you to help me develop a plan to investigate further. Catherine's eyes widened at the gravity in Marcus's voice. Do you think someone is planning to hurt people during the festival? I think we need to take that possibility very seriously, Marcus replied honestly. But, thanks to your vigilance, we have advance warning that could help us prevent whatever might be planned. Marcus immediately contacted Sir Richard Hawthorne, the head of palace security, requesting an emergency meeting. Within minutes, Sir Richard arrived in the security office, along with Captain Sarah Mitchell, who oversaw the external security arrangements. Captain Wellington, what's the nature of this emergency? Sir Richard asked as he entered, his expression alert and focused. Prince Catherine has identified some concerning patterns in staff behavior that could indicate intelligence gathering for a potential security threat, Marcus explained, gesturing for Catherine to share his observations. Catherine, despite his young age, presented his findings with remarkable clarity and organization. He described each person's unusual questioning, the specific information they had sought, and the behavioral changes he had observed in their approach to gathering that information. Captain Mitchell listened intently, taking detailed notes. When Catherine finished, she looked up with obvious concern. These observations suggest a level of coordination that would be very difficult to achieve by coincidence. Agreed, Sir Richard said grimly. Prince Catherine, your attention to these details may have prevented a serious incident. Can you think of any other unusual behaviors you've noticed recently? Catherine consulted his journal thoughtfully. There is one more thing. All 3 of them have been working extra shifts and volunteering for duties they don't usually take on. Thomas volunteered to help with the special dinner preparation for the visiting dignitaries. Maria asked to be assigned to cleaning the royal family's private quarters during the festival, and Peter requested to work on the fireworks setup crew. The implications of this additional information sent a chill through everyone in the room. The 3 suspects weren't just gathering information. They were positioning themselves for access to critical areas and high-value targets during the festival. We need to act quickly, but carefully, Sir Richard decided. If these 3 are part of a larger conspiracy, we don't want to alert other potential threats by moving too obviously against them. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling heavily on his shoulders. Catherine's observations had potentially uncovered a serious threat to the royal family and festival guests, but handling the situation incorrectly could put even more people at risk. What's our next step? Captain Mitchell asked. We need to gather more information without arousing suspicion, Sir Richard replied. Captain Wellington, I want you and Prince Catherine to continue monitoring these 3 individuals, but from a safe distance. Meanwhile, we'll conduct discreet background checks and surveillance. Sir, Marcus said carefully, I'm concerned about putting Prince Catherine in any kind of investigative role that could expose him to danger. I understand your concern, Sir Richard replied, but Prince Catherine's observational abilities are clearly superior to standard surveillance techniques. These individuals haven't noticed his attention, which gives us an advantage we can't afford to lose. Catherine looked between the adults seriously. I want to help keep everyone safe, he said firmly. But I need to understand what we're really dealing with and what the risks are. Marcus was struck by the maturity of Catherine's response. The boy was volunteering to help, while also asking for the information he needed to make an informed decision about his level of involvement. "We believe there may be a plot to cause harm during the festival," Sir Richard explained honestly. "The three individuals you've identified appear to be gathering intelligence that could support an attack on the royal family or the festival guests." Catherine absorbed this information with remarkable composure. "If I help with the investigation, how will we make sure I stay safe?" "You would never be alone," Marcus assured him. "I would be with you at all times, and we would maintain constant communication with the security team. At the first sign of direct danger, we would remove you from the situation immediately. And you would only observe and report," Captain Mitchell added. "No direct interaction with the suspects under any circumstances." Catherine nodded thoughtfully. "I think I can help with that. These people trust me because I'm just a child, so they don't realize that I'm paying attention to their behavior." Over the next 3 days, Marcus and Catherine conducted careful observation of Thomas, Maria, and Peter while maintaining their normal routines. Catherine's ability to notice subtle behavioral changes and suspicious interactions proved invaluable as the security team built a comprehensive picture of the threat. The investigation revealed that all three suspects had recent financial difficulties that made them vulnerable to outside influence. More concerning, discreet surveillance identified meetings between Peter and an unknown individual who was later determined to be connected to a radical group that opposed the monarchy. "We have enough evidence to make arrests," Sir Richard announced during a briefing on the 4th day of the investigation. "But we want to time our actions carefully to avoid disrupting the festival while ensuring maximum safety." Catherine, who had been listening quietly to the adult discussion, suddenly spoke up. "What if we let them think their plan is working, but we control what information they get?" The adults in the room turned to look at the 9-year-old boy with surprise and interest. "What do you mean?" Captain Mitchell asked. "Instead of arresting them right away, what if we give them false information about security arrangements and the royal family's schedule?" Catherine suggested. "That way, if there are other people involved that we haven't identified yet, they'll all be in the wrong place at the wrong time." Marcus stared at Catherine with amazement. The boy's strategic thinking was remarkably sophisticated, and his suggestion could potentially neutralize not just the known threats, but also any unknown accomplices. "That's actually a brilliant idea," Sir Richard said after a moment of consideration. "We could feed them false intelligence through seemingly normal channels, and then position our security accordingly. It would also give us an opportunity to identify and capture anyone else involved in the plot," Captain Mitchell added with growing enthusiasm for Catherine's strategy. The plan that emerged from Catherine's suggestion was elegant in its simplicity. Over the next 2 days, the three suspects were allowed to overhear carefully planted false information about security arrangements, timing of royal family movements, and other critical details. Meanwhile, the actual security plan was completely different, designed to protect the royal family and guests while creating optimal conditions for identifying and capturing the conspirators. On the night before the festival's opening ceremony, Marcus and Catherine were reviewing the final security arrangements in Marcus's office when Catherine suddenly looked up from the papers with a troubled expression. "Captain Marcus, I just realized something," Catherine said quietly. "What if these three people aren't bad people who chose to do something wrong? What if they're good people who got scared or desperate and made a terrible mistake?" The compassion in Catherine's voice reminded Marcus once again of the remarkable emotional intelligence that made the boy so exceptional. Even while helping to uncover a serious threat to his own safety, Catherine was concerned about the humanity of the people involved. "What makes you think that?" Marcus asked gently. "I've been watching them more closely during the investigation," Catherine explained. "Thomas looks sick when he thinks no one is watching, like he knows what he's doing is wrong but feels trapped. Maria keeps touching a locket that has pictures of her children, like she's reminding herself why she's taking this risk. And Peter seems angry, but it's the kind of anger that comes from feeling helpless about something." Marcus considered Catherine's observations carefully. The boy's ability to see beyond surface behaviors to underlying emotions was providing insights that could be crucial for understanding the full scope of the threat and the motivations of those involved. "You might be right," Marcus said thoughtfully. "People rarely choose to betray their principles unless they feel they have no other options. If that's true, Catherine continued, then maybe there's a way to help them out of whatever situation forced them to make these choices, instead of just punishing them. The wisdom of this perspective struck Marcus profoundly. Catherine was suggesting an approach that addressed root causes rather than just symptoms, potentially preventing future similar incidents while showing mercy to people who might be victims of circumstances as much as perpetrators of wrongdoing. I think you should share that observation with Sir Richard, Marcus suggested. Your insights about their emotional states could be valuable for understanding how to handle the situation when we apprehend them. Do you think it will make a difference? Catherine asked hopefully. I think your compassionate way of seeing people always makes a difference, Marcus replied with complete honesty. You help all of us remember that everyone has a story, and that understanding those stories is often the key to finding the best solutions. As they prepared for what promised to be a tense and challenging festival opening, Marcus reflected on how Catherine's involvement in this security crisis had demonstrated not just his observational abilities, but also his capacity for strategic thinking and moral reasoning that surpassed many adults. The boy who had once worried about people not listening to his insights was now playing a crucial role in protecting the safety of everyone he cared about, while still maintaining the compassion and wisdom that made him truly special. Tomorrow would test everything they had learned and planned, but Marcus felt confident that with Catherine's remarkable abilities supporting their efforts, they would be able to keep everyone safe while addressing the underlying issues that had created the threat in the first place. The morning of the Winter Festival's opening ceremony dawned clear and cold, with fresh snow covering the palace grounds like a pristine white carpet. Marcus stood at his post outside the Great Hall, watching as guests began arriving for what promised to be one of the most significant social events of the year. Beneath the festive atmosphere and elegant preparations, a carefully coordinated security operation was unfolding based on the intelligence that Prince Catherine had gathered through his remarkable observational abilities. Catherine himself was dressed in formal royal attire for his first official appearance at a major diplomatic function. The deep blue velvet jacket and silver ceremonial sash made him look older than his 9 years. But when Marcus caught his eye across the hall, the boy's expression held the same thoughtful awareness that had become so familiar over their months together. Sir Richard Hawthorne had positioned security personnel throughout the palace according to the modified plan that incorporated Catherine's strategic suggestions. The 3 suspects, Thomas, Maria, and Peter, had been fed false information about the royal family's movements and security arrangements, while the actual protective measures operated on a completely different schedule and positioning. As the morning progressed, Marcus maintained constant but discreet communication with the security team while keeping Catherine within sight at all times. The boy moved through the social interactions required by his royal role with growing confidence, greeting visiting dignitaries and their families with the natural warmth and perceptive attention that characterized all his interactions with people. Captain Wellington, Queen Isabella appeared at Marcus's side during a brief lull in the ceremonial activities. How is Catherine handling his first major public event? Marcus glanced toward where Catherine was engaged in conversation with the young daughter of the ambassador from Nordmark, patiently answering her questions about the palace's history. He's doing remarkably well, Your Majesty. His genuine interest in people is serving him well in these diplomatic interactions. And the other situation? Queen Isabella asked quietly, referring to the security concerns that Catherine had identified. Everything is proceeding according to plan, Marcus replied. Prince Catherine's insights have given us significant advantages in managing the potential threat. Queen Isabella's expression showed both pride in her son and concern for his safety. I'm still amazed that he noticed patterns that our security professionals had missed. Before Marcus could respond, Captain Mitchell's voice came through his discreet earpiece. All teams, be advised. The suspects are beginning to move into their assigned positions. The operation will commence shortly. Marcus felt his attention sharpen as the critical moment approached. According to the false intelligence they had provided, the royal family would be moving to the East Wing for a private reception in 20 minutes. In reality, Catherine and Queen Isabella would remain safely in the Great Hall, surrounded by security personnel, while the suspected conspirators moved toward what they believed would be an opportunity to carry out their plan. Catherine, engaged in conversation with several young guests near the main fireplace, seemed completely at ease despite knowing that his observations had uncovered a serious threat to everyone's safety. Marcus marveled at the boy's composure and maturity in handling such a complex and dangerous situation. Prince Catherine called Lady Elizabeth Hartwell, approaching with her teenage son Alexander. "I'd like you to meet my son. He's very interested in the astronomical studies you've been pursuing." As Catherine engaged enthusiastically with Alexander about constellation patterns and planetary movements, Marcus received another update through his earpiece. Thomas has entered the East Wing kitchen facility. Maria is approaching the East Corridor service areas. Peter is moving toward the East Garden access points. All teams maintain ready positions. The carefully orchestrated plan was working exactly as designed. The three suspects were positioning themselves for what they believed would be an attack on the royal family, while actually walking into a controlled situation where they could be apprehended safely without endangering any innocent people. Marcus watched Catherine continue his conversations with the young guests, explaining complex scientific concepts in simple terms that sparked their curiosity and interest. The boy's natural teaching ability and genuine enthusiasm for learning were creating exactly the kind of positive interactions that made these diplomatic events successful. All teams, suspects are in position, came the next security update. Unknown individuals have been spotted approaching the East Wing from external positions. We have confirmation of additional conspirators. Initiating apprehension procedures now. Marcus felt a surge of relief that Catherine's intuitive suggestion to use false intelligence had indeed revealed other participants in the plot who might have escaped detection otherwise. The boy's strategic thinking had potentially saved multiple lives and prevented a catastrophic security breach. Queen Isabella, who was also receiving security updates through a discreet earpiece, moved closer to Catherine's position while maintaining her social interactions with the assembled guests. The coordination between security requirements and diplomatic necessities was proceeding smoothly thanks to the advance warning Catherine's observations had provided. "Captain Wellington," Sir Richard's voice came through clearly. "All primary suspects have been apprehended without incident. Additionally, we've detained 3 external conspirators who were moving into position for what appears to have been a coordinated attack. The threat has been neutralized." Marcus allowed himself a moment of profound relief before refocusing on his protective duties. The immediate danger had passed, but Catherine and the other guests would need to continue their social obligations without any indication that a serious security operation had just concluded successfully. Catherine, still engaged in animated discussion about astronomy with Alexander Hartwell, glanced briefly toward Marcus and seemed to understand from his expression that the situation had been resolved positively. A small smile crossed the boy's face before he returned his attention to explaining how to identify the constellation Orion in the winter sky. As the formal reception continued, Marcus reflected on the remarkable sequence of events that had brought them to this moment. Catherine's gift for observing human behavior had identified a serious threat. His strategic thinking had helped develop an effective response plan, and his emotional intelligence had provided insights into the motivations of the people involved that could prove valuable for understanding and preventing future similar incidents. Later that afternoon, after the immediate security concerns had been fully addressed and the festival celebrations were proceeding normally, Marcus and Catherine found themselves in Queen Isabella's private study for a debriefing session with Sir Richard and Captain Mitchell. "Prince Catherine," Sir Richard began, "I want you to understand the significance of what you accomplished. Your observations identified a coordinated plot that could have resulted in serious harm to many people. Your strategic suggestions helped us apprehend not just the 3 suspects you initially identified, but also 3 additional conspirators we never would have detected otherwise." Catherine listened seriously to this summary, but Marcus could see questions forming in the boy's thoughtful expression. "What will happen to Thomas and Maria and Peter now?" Catherine asked. Captain Mitchell consulted her notes before responding. During their interrogation, all 3 admitted that they were coerced into participating through threats to their families. Thomas's daughter was being held by the conspirators, Maria's children were threatened with violence, and Peter's elderly mother was essentially kidnapped to force his cooperation. Catherine's expression showed both relief and sadness at this information. So they weren't really bad people who chose to do wrong things. They were good people trying to protect their families. That's exactly right, Sir Richard confirmed. Your insights about their emotional states were remarkably accurate. They were acting under extreme duress rather than from genuine hostility toward the royal family. What about their families? Catherine asked with obvious concern. Are they safe now? All the family members have been safely recovered, Queen Isabella assured her son. And Thomas, Maria, and Peter will face reduced charges in recognition of the coercive circumstances. They'll receive support to help them rebuild their lives rather than simply being punished. Marcus watched Catherine process this information with the same thoughtful attention he brought to all complex human situations. The boy's compassionate approach to understanding people's motivations had influenced not just the investigation, but also the ultimate resolution of the crisis. I'm glad their families are safe, Catherine said quietly. But I feel sad that they had to go through such a scary experience because of people who wanted to hurt us. The emotional sophistication of Catherine's response impressed everyone in the room. Despite being the primary target of the thwarted attack, the boy's first concern was for